It's not just a London issue, and this is highlighted very nicely by Gareth Bacon, who is the MP for Orpington, which is Greater London.
Yeah.
And he is highlighting the fact that the Sadiq Khan's team are going to sell this as a tax on the wealthy, and this is going to improve air quality in
Ulez
central.
being expanded, is it?
It's the ultra-low emission zone being expanded. So it's an extra £12.50 per day charge to drive through the zone. Gareth Bacon's argument is that it doesn't affect the wealthy. This actually affects the lowest income households. 50% of outer London households who earn around about £10,000 own a car. Yeah. They tend to be older cars, but they are dependent upon them. And that increases up to 70% for those households earning $20,000. So these aren't your highest earners. These are people going around their everyday lives trying to get on. And if we look at all of the problems that we've had with strikes, you cannot get a train. And I think what Sadiq Khan is failing to understand is that everywhere is not like Islington.
Yeah.
Nigel should also agree with this, considering that we live in quite a rural area, which doesn't have very many bus services, if any, a very poor train service, and we rely upon a car. And all we have to do is drive 10 miles towards Dartford and across that border into Greater London, and we would be charged £12.50.
Yeah, Nigel, it's worth picking up on the fact that a lot of bad ideas start in London. This is taxation dressed as salvation. And it will be going. It's already in Manchester. It's in Birmingham. It's been proposed in Bradford. It's been proposed in Oxford. This isn't just a London-centric thing that we should be bothered about down here. This is coming to a town near you, and it's going to hammer the poorest motorist hardest, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's going to hammer every motorist. The question comes down to whether or not we really want to try and reach net zero by 2050. And if we do, there's a lot of sacrifices have to be made along the way. Now, I appreciate there's some research by TfL for this particular scheme that it may not help air quality that much. But the whole aim of these things is to do just that. So my view is we should be going for net zero, going hell for leather for net zero, and schemes like this we're going to have to accept. It's going to be uncomfortable for all of us.
But what if if net zero makes people net poorer and net colder? I mean, that's what's happening, Claire.
But it is, and I don't agree that this is anything to do with net zero and all of those very laudable aims, which I fundamentally disagree with, because I do think you're right. I think it does make people poorer. I think this whole push towards net zero is just very expensive, very ill thought through, and isn't going to work. But I think the real crux of the issue here is it's going to do very little for air quality, but an awful lot to prop up a failing administration by taking in fines from people who can least afford it. And that seems to be what Sadiq is doing, trying to balance his own budget, taking money from motorists.
Yeah.
Everyone, this is Louis French here, Member of Parliament for Old Bexley and Sidcup. And I'm here today in Checks with David, business owner, who's been here for 45 years in Bexley Village. And we're here to talk about Ulez. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has disgracefully announced this morning they will be pursuing the Ulez expansion to cover all of Greater London and Bexley. Now, to put that in perspective, Ulez is set to impact over 28,000 vehicles, including cars and vans in Bexley alone from August next year. So those drivers of those vans and cars will face bills of up to £4,500 a year to just drive, whether that's for business, whether that's to visit family and friends, take the kids to school, or even worse, the likes of nurses and police officers that we desperately need and require here in Bexley to work. David, what's your thoughts on the Ulez expansion this morning?
I think it's appalling, Louis, to be honest with you. I believe that over 80% of people, both general public and businesses, are against it. I just feel the figures have been a little bit massaged here. We want to bring people into the village. We've got small businesses here, we're not large concerns. We need to survive, and to survive after COVID, we need more people coming in. Now, what concerns me is the people that live here, they live here, but we need to attract new people in from outside. People who live in Kent, which is where we would rather
just
be.
Up the road, just up the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'd rather be Kent than London Borough. We didn't want that in the first place. Are they going to spend £12.50 if their car's not compliant to come into the village? Probably not. Yeah. And this is just something we are so against it. And I just feel that Sadiq Khan just does not have a handle on small business. He has no idea.
And it disproportionately does impact, like you said, those lower income families, but also older people that were told to buy a diesel car when Sadiq Khan was in the last Labour government. Of course. This what I mean. People can't just afford to go and buy a new car, especially with the cost of living as it is. Everything is going up. You can't buy a car. And if you had one message for Sadiq Khan today on these Ulez plans, what would it be?
Resign.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hosey. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and in common with colleagues, I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Dartford, for calling what I think is a very important debate. And I'd also like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Runnymede and Weybridge, because he's right. This is an interest that I've taken a deep interest in the ultra-low emission zone expansion for some period of time, and that is because there are a number of big problems with this policy. The first is that Sadiq Khan doesn't have a mandate for it. He claims that Ulez expansion is absolutely essential to tackle air pollution, and we heard his briefing being faithfully read out by the honourable member for Swansea West and the honourable member for Putney. But given that he was only re-elected to City Hall last year, you would imagine, wouldn't you, Mr. Hosey, that this would feature very prominently in his manifesto. But it doesn't. This is the 100-page manifesto that Sadiq Khan went to the polls on, and on one paragraph on page 55, it mentions the ultra-low emission zone. But that was specifically pertaining to the extension to the North and South Circular in October 2021, which he had already announced. There is no mention whatever of expanding the boundary to the outer part of Greater London. And when he decided in May of this year that he was going to push ahead with this, although it wasn't a direct quote, the Evening Standard article that covered the announcement said, on Friday morning, Sadiq Khan insisted that he would not press ahead with the plans if the public overwhelmingly rejected them during the public consultation. The same article quoted the Mayor directly as saying, it's a genuine consultation, as were the previous two consultations in relation to the Central London ultra-low emission zone and the expansion. I hope Londoners who care about the health of their families will respond. And they did, in large numbers. But the Mayor initially refused to release the results of that consultation, and eventually, after public pressure on the 25th of November, the results were released, and they revealed the following. 60% of those who responded to the consultation opposed the Sadiq Khan's Ulez expansion to outer London. And that figure increases to 68% when you include the organised responses that the member for Swansea West mentioned earlier on. 70% of outer London residents opposed the expansion, and 80% of those who work in outer London were also opposed. So this policy has no mandate, and it has no public support. And it turns out it's not about air quality either, contrary again to the propaganda that was read out by the members opposite, which comes directly from the briefing sent by the Mayor of London. This is not some hatchet job. This is the Mayor's own integrated impact assessment that I quoted from earlier on. I gave one example. There are many where it uses phrases like negligible to minor in terms of the impact that it would have on air quality. So there's no mandate, there's no public support, and it's not really about air quality. The impact is negligible. So why is the Mayor of London so interested in Ulez expansion, and why is he rushing it? Well, the answer, Mr. Hosey, is as old as time. It's about money. This is a cash grab, pure and simple. According to TfL's own figures, it expects the £12.50 charge to hit 160,000 cars and 42,000 vans per day. In monetary terms, that's about £2.5 million per day. It's a big cash injection into the Mayor's coffers. There's a question about timing. Each of the previous Ulez's, when they were introduced, the inner one and the outer one, there were years for people to prepare. In this case, there is 9 months to prepare. The average family cannot save up to buy a car that quickly, especially when household bills are rising, and we know that they are. Small businesses and charities may be forced to replace one vehicle or even a fleet that they had banked on being able to use for many years to come. So who gets hit? Well, the Mayor of London doesn't seem to understand who will be picking up the bill for his policies. It's not wealthy Londoners. It's ordinary working people, those on the poor end of the socioeconomic spectrum, who are less likely to be able to upgrade their car, who are more likely to own an older vehicle. Now, there is a myth that Mayor Khan attempts to spread around that low-income Londoners do not own cars or drive in Greater London, and that is categorically false. And what's more, he knows that. This is a report produced by Transport for London in 2019 called Travel in London. In it, Transport for London's own analysis shows that 50% of outer London households earning as little as £10,000 own a car, and car ownership rockets to in excess of 70% for those earning upwards of £20,000. According to TfL's own impact assessment, low-income Londoners are more likely to own non-compliant vehicles. So this is not a tax on wealthy drivers, but on poorer people who simply cannot afford to buy a new vehicle. In my own constituency, where we don't have tubes, we don't have trams, we have trains that go into central London, and we have private vehicles. 83% of Orpington households own a car, meaning that a great number of my constituents could be liable to pay this charge. Many of my constituents, as we heard from my honourable friend, the member for Ruislip North and Pinner, use their car every day to go to work, to the shops, to visit family and friends. And under the Mayor's plan, they face potentially disastrous annual bill of £4,500. We heard from other members about the impact on public services. Over half of Greater London's police officers and firefighters, and around a fifth of the workers in my local NHS trust, come into Greater London from outside. They are more reliant on their cars, especially those who work in Outer London, and especially those who work on shift work. For some on a night shift, they face a double whammy of a £12.50 charge driving to work, and then a £12.50 charge after midnight when they drive home. So it could cost them £25 per shift to go and do their work. But it will also impact on businesses in Outer London. Many people drive in from Kent to shop in Pettswood, in my constituency, but TfL estimates that 8% have non-compliant vehicles. Rather than paying £12.50 a time, many of those will simply choose to shop and visit elsewhere, depriving London's high streets of customers. But for the drivers, both in London and those who travel from outside to work, shop or visit outer boroughs, many are unaware that they may face an even higher bill. We heard from my honourable friend, the member for Dartford, about the increase in the level of fines, up to £180. He's just hiked it from 130 to 160, and he's going to go further from January next year. It's going to go up to 180. So if you cross into Greater London, perhaps unaware of the boundary, unaware of the existence of the charge, or that your vehicle is not compliant, you will unknowingly rack up a cripplingly high bill, and potentially as many as 12,000 cars and vans a day may be hit by a fine. The RAC estimate that Transport for London could raise £260 million a year by imposing these penalties. And to put that into context, one insurance firm, Churchill Insurance, estimated that the total parking fines raised by every council in the country combined would come up at £250 million, £10 million lower than what Transport for London will make with this in the first year. But in fact, of course, TfL could earn significantly more than that, because if every driver pays within 14 days, reducing the penalty from £180 to £90, that could raise £390 million for Transport for London every year. Mr Hosey, the Mayor of London has not been a success in office. The Metropolitan Police and the London Fire Brigade are both in special measures. Violent crime reached record highs, and it has not abated. He is not on target to deliver enough affordable homes, despite what he himself boasted about as being the largest settlement from central government on record. Crossrail was years late and billions of pounds over budget, with billions of pounds more lost in fares that were never raised. I'm just coming to my closing my remarks, Mr. Hosey.
Back onto low emission zones.
Indeed I am. So the point I'm trying to make, Mr Hosey, is that Sadiq Khan is looking for something he can point to and claim as his. Now, leaving aside that the fact that the ultra-low emission zone was not even his idea, it was conceived and the preparatory work was done under Boris Johnson, he has adopted the Ulez as his big idea. But the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone to outer London has no mandate. It has no popular support. It will do
that if you're a low-income family, if you're a small business, if you're a charity, if you're a disabled Londoner, you may be driving a polluting vehicle and need help. I've also announced today a massive scrappage scheme, £110 million, which also enables you to retrofit your vehicle if you want to do so, if you can't make the option of changing from your car to a cleaner vehicle.
The Mayor of London, despite objections, has decided to expand the Ulez zone across all London boroughs, which will massively impact my constituents and those who share a border with London. Will he therefore urgently speak to the Transport Secretary and encourage him to use the powers at his disposal to reverse this disastrous decision?
Well, my honourable friend will know that Transport in London is devolved to the Labour Mayor of London, but it is disappointing that the Mayor, backed by the Leader of the Opposition, is choosing not to listen to the public. The zone is being expanded against the overwhelming views of residents and businesses, and I'd urgently consider the Mayor and the gentleman opposite to be on the side of hard-working Londoners.
David!